Hello friends, it's me, and today let's watch Film Theory, the complete Disney theory from the film theorists. Together, let's go, let's start. Thank you.
What if every Disney movie took place on the same timeline? What if every one of the worlds that makes up the happiest place on Earth was actually the same world? What if everything from Snow White to Atlantis to Strange World to Aladdin actually was all set on the same world? Well, today I'm gonna prove just how that's possible.
Yep, a lot of what if. The Disney theory.
Hello Internet, welcome to Film Theory, the show pointing at a conspiracy board full of cutouts of Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, and Chernabog. They're all
Hello Internet, welcome to Film Theory.
connected. So, welcome to one of the longest episodes of Film Theory ever. So long that it was recorded over multiple sessions during which I got sick, so if my voice changes, that's why.
Sorry.
So for as much as we might rightfully rag on them for their terrible business practices, there's no denying that the artists at Disney put a lot of love into their animation. There's no doubt a lot of nostalgic love for these stories, and I wondered, well, what if they were all part of the same story?
What if there was one complete, cohesive Disney timeline of the Disney universe? The Disneyverse, if you will. Now, you may have seen this sort of idea around the internet before, specifically with the Pixar theory. This was a fun project originally created by John Negroni and picked up by fellow theorists like the Super Carlin brothers, trying to fit all of the Pixar movies into one complete timeline. It's a big challenge, and one that I really respect those creators for taking on. And I wanted to throw my hat into the ring with something similar. The Disney theory, doing the same thing with all of Disney's movies. Matt had previously connected a handful of Disney movies with cameos and Easter eggs, but I wanted to do them all, from Snow White to Moana 2. And it turned out much longer than I anticipated. Like, seriously, I was thinking this would be a special 25 to 30 minute video. And this turned into an epic that was over 45 minutes.
And with my reaction, probably 1 hour. Sorry.
Okay, how are we gonna be doing this? What are our rules? Like, most of Disney's movies are pretty ambiguous about when and where they take place, and putting them all together is gonna be a bit janky. But basically, we're going to be looking at all of the historical settings, landscapes, clothes, source material, cameos, and Easter eggs across all of the films to tie them together as best we can. And shoutouts to the awesome fan wikis and channel Mickeyology for being great resources for a lot of the information regarding all of that jazz. They were excellent starting points and just invaluable for us today. Regardless, the most important thing for us is to make sure that the main 62 films in the Disney canon fit in here. If you don't know, the Disney canon are the movies made specifically by Walt Disney Animation Studios. This is Disney's main animation studio that makes their tentpole, big-budget movies directly associated with the Disney brand. Just to be clear, that doesn't include other studios they've owned, the likes of Pixar or Blue Sky Studios or Image Movers or whatever. Like, those are their own things, and maybe we'll get to them someday. For the most part, it also doesn't include works from Disney Toon Studios or Disney Television Animation. Those were the people behind the direct-to-video sequels or animated series spin-offs for the main Disney canon. That being said, sometimes these sequels and spin-offs will have details that will help us definitively place the movies or support the world that we're building here. In those cases, we'll be using them, but we will make sure to call that out. But again, the most important thing for this theory is getting those main 62 films placed. Those extras are just a nice bonus if they fit in too.
But with all of that done and dusted, loyal theorists, grab a drink and a snack and get comfortable as we dive into the Disney theory, one of our longest theories ever. Okay.
Oh, so I'm eating right now, so I'm having snacks. Actually, this is my meal, but yeah, same. Same but different.
So, right off the bat, there's a common thread that ties all of the movies in the Disney canon together, and it's a sprinkling of that Disney magic. No, I mean literally, Disney magic. The thing that distinguishes this universe apart from ours is magic, whether that be through talking animals or ghosts or just straight up wizards. So, the first thing to do here is figure out, where does that magic come from? Well, the answer is simple. Stars. I'm talking wishing stars, shooting stars, magic from the sun, which is just a big old star. For whatever reason, in the Disneyverse, stars are inherently magical and can pass that magic along to whatever they touch, and that is, well, everything. See, in the real world, everything is made of star stuff, elements that were first created inside of stars. The same thing is happening here, just with magic alongside the science. As the corniest song in Wish put it,
If you really wanna know just who you are, you're
a star!
After the Big Bang and the formation of all these magic stars, the first thing we see is the Rite of Spring sequence from Fantasia, which shows us the formation of Earth and the development of life, leading up to the age of the dinosaurs. That naturally takes us to Disney's Dinosaur, set in the Cretaceous period at least 65 million years ago, when the dinosaurs would have existed alongside the ancestors of lemurs. But of course, the dinosaurs couldn't last forever, and just like in our universe, a meteor impacts the planet and kills them off. We actually see a lot of them die in that same Rite of Spring sequence in Fantasia. It's dark. But that wasn't the end of life on the planet, and in fact, the star magic would basically supercharge the rest of the life on Earth. In Fantasia 2000, the humpback whale sequence opens up with the star shining down on the ocean. And then, the Northern Lights. This is a phenomenon caused by the Earth's magnetosphere interacting with the sun's light. The sun itself is just a star, so that makes the Northern Lights magic in this universe. And believe me, we'll get to that in a second. Regardless, this sets the stage for magic to spread across the skies, allowing those whales to take flight. We're dating this sequence back to 120,000 years ago, after humpback whales migrated to the pine tree-populated Northern Hemisphere, but before the most recent ice age fully set in. And along with these flying humpback whales, all of the magic also allows for the emergence of various creatures that are only legends in our world. Giants and dragons, nymphs and fairies, mermaids, and all manner of mythological beasts and supersized species. Additionally, it left many animals capable of understanding human speech, and gifted some with the ability to speak, though that doesn't really become relevant until much, much later. This brings us to the dawn of human civilization with the rise of Atlantis around 13,000 BC, as seen in Atlantis: The Lost Empire. Just to put that into perspective, that would have been during the last ice age. The technology of Atlantis was driven by magic crystals above the city, which were conspicuously compared to stars.
Then, bright light, like a star, floating above the city.
Further proof that magic comes from stars in this world. However, as the Atlantean Empire thrived, other less advanced human civilizations were also popping up across the world, each with their own relationship with this star magic. For instance, we have Brother Bear, set in what is now Alaska, around 9,500 BC. We can place it there since it takes place in that sweet spot between the last ice age wrapping up, but before the extinction of the Columbian mammoth. In the film, we once again see traces of magic from the stars in the Northern Lights. Told you we'd be getting back to that one. And in Brother Bear, we see this magic has the power to interact with both human and animal spirits, literally transforming Kenai into a bear. Across the planet, humans start recognizing the power of magic and sought to bottle it up and harness it for themselves. Sometimes they did this in literal bottles. This gave rise to races of magical beings like the genies, concentrated personifications of that wishing magic. Unfortunately, we know from the Aladdin animated series that genies were later hunted to near extinction, perhaps due to some backlash against magic, considering the devastation that could occur if it fell into the wrong hands. Only a few survivors, like Aladdin's genie, were spared and hidden away in places like the Cave of Wonders. We can actually clock Genie's imprisonment starting in 8600 BC, since
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck!
And we know that Aladdin takes place in 1400 AD. We'll get there, I promise. And here is where we get to the most pivotal point in the early Disneyverse, the year 7000 BC and the fall of Atlantis, as seen in that movie's prologue. Using their magically fueled technology, Atlantis accidentally nuked the whole planet and created a giant tidal wave. Whoopsie! This led to the sinking of Atlantis and a great flood that hit the entire planet, as referenced by Milo and Kida later in the movie.
Such knowledge has been lost to us since the time of the Maybermok.
Oh, the Great Flood.
This is also where the Noah's Ark sequence from Fantasia 2000 would fit in, where we see Noah save the animals and ferry them to the only sliver of land that's not completely submerged. So that's good news for Noah and his animals, but what about the rest of humanity? Kind of hard to come back from the whole world getting flooded, isn't it? Well, thankfully, there were parts of civilization like Avalonia from Strange World that were able to survive on the backs of giant turtles. Yeah, really. These were likely created by the magic that brought back life after the dinosaurs, and we see in Strange World that they're using the flooded planet as their own personal swimming pool. And believe it or not, but this isn't even the only example of this we see in the Disney canon. In the direct-to-video sequel Aladdin and the King of Thieves, the gang discover the remnants of an ancient civilization built on the back of a giant turtle. Sound familiar? That's just further proof that humans were forced to resettle on the backs of these giant turtles until the continents re-emerged. Oh, and just as a little bonus here, we actually have a direct connection between Atlantis and Strange World. We see an Atlantean book written in its distinctive language at the end of Strange World, suggesting that the fall of Atlantis was studied by the surviving humans. However, eventually Avalonia would have been flooded again as the giant turtles died, or just decided to go back underwater. They got a little divine intervention from some very powerful individuals, thus beginning Disney's Age of the Gods. Yeah, at this point, higher powers swoop in to reshape the world and fix the mess left behind by Atlantis. The first to step up is Tafiti, who raised the land from the ocean and unflooded the planet.
In the beginning, there was only ocean, until the mother island emerged.
But Tafiti was only one such powerful being. There were others, including the Titans and other giant monsters like Tamatoa, who brought chaos to the world, earthquakes and volcanoes that never slept. Enter other pantheons like the Greek gods, who imprisoned the Titans and monsters beneath the seas to help humanity thrive. These prisons became small worlds unto themselves, like Lalotai in Moana, and Wonderland in Alice in Wonderland. Even some powerful mortal sorcerers were imprisoned in similar worlds or trapped in items like cauldrons.
In the god spirit, since no prison could hold him, he was thrown alive into a crucible of molten iron.
Dang man, Zeus don't mess around. Regardless, only creatures that could feasibly coexist with humans were allowed to hang around. Dragons and mermaids were left off the hook, as were certain demigods like Maui, who set humanity up for success by taming nature. Speaking of
You're welcome. Thank you.
demigods, this actually leads us to the story of Hercules, set in 1000 BC. We know this thanks to a date we can see on a credit card in the movie. Guess all that wish magic also got capitalism a jumpstart in this timeline. This film also shows us that gods are still running the show, since we see the Greek pantheon and Hercules almost ascend to become one of them. Oh, and just before we move on, Hercules also lets us place the Lion King and all of its ancestor star magic roughly at the same time. See, one of the famous labors of Hercules in Greek myth to prove that he was a hero was killing the Nemean lion, a beast that was terrorizing the town of Nemea. Well, in the Disney movie, we see Hercules wearing a lion pelt that is identical to Scar. So somehow, Scar survived being attacked by the hyenas, and the Lion King made his way up to Greece and was eventually defeated by Hercules. And just to get it out of the way, yes, the Timon and Pumbaa series features those two in the modern day, but those aren't the same Timon and Pumbaa from the movie universe. Timon in the films has 5 stripes on his back, but only 3 in the show, so it's non-canon or some weird alternate universe. But enough about that, let's get back to the Disney gods. Something happened that drove the gods away, or made them take a hands-off approach moving forward, and that thing was the Droon from Raya and the Last Dragon. In the year 800 BC, dark entities known as the Droon spread across the world with the power to turn any creature into stone. And though you might not be able to kill a god, you can trap them forever on a rock. So how can we put this at 800 BC? Well, we know that the Droon rose to power 500 years before the main events of Raya.
Well, that all began 500 years ago.
And given the presence of iron weapons and crossbows in the main story, we can estimate that Raya is set around 300 BC, so 500 years before that would make this 800 BC. Regardless, after the gods left, magical beings called dragons defeated the Droon in the fictional Southeast Asian subcontinent of Kumandra, though they were themselves trapped in stone. 500 years later, the Droon were released once again during the main events of Raya before being defeated once and for all. With the Droon finally gone for good, humanity once again thrives, though Polynesia suffers after the demigod Maui steals the heart of Tafiti and triggers a slowly encroaching wave of darkness that drains life from the islands across the Pacific. Don't worry, we'll get back to that story shortly, but first we have to take a brief pit stop in Europe. Here we have the Black Cauldron. Yeah, I bet you forgot about this one. Honestly, I thought that this one was going to be a challenge since it takes place in a fantasy world known as Prydain, until I dug into it and discovered that Prydain is just another name for the country of Wales in Great Britain, thus setting it firmly on Earth. Anyway, this film has to take place around the 500s AD, since the helmet that Taran imagines himself wearing resembles a Spangen helm, a real type of helmet popular during this century. Likewise, this leads us directly into the Sword in the Stone, set just a slight jaunt away in 500s England. Here, King Arthur rises to power to become a legendary hero under the tutelage of the mage Merlin. This is the date range typically given for Arthurian legend, which more or less lines up with what we see in the film. We're also going to set the famous Sorcerer's Apprentice story from Fantasia here, which sees the sorcerer Yin Sid and his apprentice, a strange, humanoid mouse creature named Mickey. These animal-human hybrids will become much more common later on in the timeline and are likely the result of star magic really fast-tracking evolution of other species. Anyway, we're placing this here because of the similarity between Yin Sid and Merlin's attire, and the similar use of magic. That's not to say they're the same character, but they are clearly peers. And now, back to the Pacific to round out the first millennium. We have Moana and Moana 2. These are set in Polynesia during the 900s, and we can chalk this date up to some real-world history. See, Moana's story unfolds during a period called the Long Pause. This was a time when the exploration of the ocean by the Polynesian peoples stalled for over 1,000 years, and ended in the 10th century. Well, in the Disneyverse, this came to an end thanks to Moana's adventure to Te Fiti, which reignites the desire to explore in her people.
What's up, guys? Future Lee here. I just saw Moana 2 and wanted to talk about how it impacts the timeline. Mostly, it doesn't. There was a joke in this movie where Maui said that the gods may have butt-dialed Moana, and no one knew what he was talking about, but that it would make sense in about 2,000 years. At first, that concerned me because, hey, that doesn't line up with present day, especially if this is set in like 900 AD. But there are multiple other instances where it does line up with that timeline of about 900 AD. The last Tautai before Moana is said to have been about 1,000 years ago, which lines up with the Great Pause. And likewise, Matangi, the Bat Lady, was trapped in that giant clam for 1,000 years. Again, all of that lines up with the Great Pause, so we're going to say that Dwayne Johnson just ad-libbed that line, and we're gonna leave it at that.
This then
Aww, Disney planned to make a movie in the year 2900.
gets us to the start of a new millennium, and before we go further here, I have to make a note. Not every kingdom depicted in the Disney universe has a great real-world analog. Like, some of them might have been one of the thousands of small petty kingdoms that popped up around Europe in the Middle Ages before merging or getting eaten up by a larger kingdom or nation, but in the Disneyverse, it seems like plenty of these lands continued to dot the map as independent states for a prolonged period, at least up until the 20th century. For example, according to Disney, Wish is set in the 1200s off the southern coast of Spain. If I were to guess...
Wait a minute first. Sorry. Let there be light. Huh? 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 No! Ah, there you go. One more time. Let there be light. Ta-da! A little bit brighter.
Takes place on Ibiza, or a similar island in the Mediterranean, allowing for travelers from all over Europe and Africa to find their way there. That would also make it a prime candidate to spread parts of its culture across the region, and why we see so many early versions of classic fairy tale stuff like fairy godmothers and magic mirrors in Wish before they pop up in other European stories. Like, for instance, Sleeping Beauty. Thankfully, this one is easy. It takes place within the borders of what is now France in the 1300s.
Now, Father, you're living in the past. This is the 14th century.
Gotta love when they make it easy. And also shoutouts to Maleficent, who is one of the many dark wizards who seems to be taking advantage of the darker side of the star magic. From here, things start to get busy. Particularly, the 1400s were huge for our Disney timeline. First up, we have the Emperor's New Groove, set in Peru during the era of the Incan Empire, so we're gonna plop this one in the early 1400s. We also get another example of magic in this world transforming a human into an animal, which is just very much a recurring theme in the Disneyverse. Next up, we have one of my personal faves, Mulan, set in China, and we can actually determine the exact year this takes place in. See, despite the legend dating back all the way to the 400s AD here in the real world, the Disneyverse Mulan takes place much later, since we see both the Great Wall of China and the Imperial Palace, the latter of which wasn't completed until around 1420 AD. Then, in Mulan 2, we see a calendar that dates the film to the year of the Fire Ox. That only occurs once every 60 years, and the first year of the Fire Ox after the completion of the Imperial Palace was in 1457. Also worth noting that the Fa family guardians like Mushu were dragons trapped in stone, very similar to the dragons we saw in Raya. Perhaps the Droon had an impact here in China as well. Regardless, we can actually use the Imperial Palace to place Aladdin around the same time, since he and Jasmine finished their whole new world date by watching fireworks over the Imperial Palace in the Forbidden City. Now, before you say anything, I know there's a popular theory out there that suggests that Aladdin takes place in the far future, future, since Genie makes a ton of modern pop culture references despite being locked up in the lamp for 10,000 years. But this isn't the case, and those timey-wimey references can actually be explained thanks to the Aladdin animated series. See, in one episode, Aladdin and his friends travel back in time to the founding of Agrabah. Here, the mystical sands of time are spilled onto the site where the city would be founded, and Genie ends up bottling up some of the time travel magic for himself to use whenever he wants. This might be a bit weird and retroactive, but this is likely how his past self knew about all of those modern references. Time travel is just super confusing, man. Those sands of time might—
Hey, time travel! I see that as an absolute win.
also explain how crossover episodes like the one we see between Aladdin and Hercules can happen, despite those two movies being separated by thousands of years. Just wild stuff. Besides, Genie isn't even the first to do this. All the way back in The Sword and the Stone, Merlin used to take vacations in the 21st century on a regular basis. And finally, rounding out the 1400s, we can hop back over to France where we see the events of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. If this is anything like the Victor Hugo novel it's based on, that means it's set in the year 1482. And it also shows us another example of star magic bringing things to life, like with the gargoyles. Oh, and before you call out that Beauty and the Beast should fall here because we see a woman who looks like Belle cameo in this movie, it can't. There are other factors in Beauty and the Beast that place it later on. But both of these movies are set in France. Perhaps this is an ancestor of Belle's who just happens to look a lot like her. And now, probably 10 plus minutes into our timeline here, we finally get to the very—
Yup, so same but different. Same but different.
first Disney animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. Using where the original fairy tale originated as well as the aesthetic look of the era and the use of minecart technology, we can place this firmly in what is now Germany in the 1500s. Then there's Pocahontas, set in Virginia during 1607. That's literally spelled out for us in the first few lyrics of the film. Again, love when they make it easy and somewhat consistent with real-world history, even if the rest of the film isn't at all. Though, again, this movie does show us the long-term impacts of the star magic on the nature of the Disneyverse, with elemental forces like wind and trees literally being alive in this world. Anyway, this leads up into Beauty and the Beast, which is set in France during the mid to late 1700s. We know this thanks to the aesthetic look of the era and Cogsworth referencing Rococo architecture, which prominently emerged in the 1730s. We actually covered when and where this takes place in an old episode of Food Theory, so go check that out. Just a few decades later, we have the Legend of Sleepy Hollow segment from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This is Disney's version of the Headless Horseman story. It's based on another real-world book by Washington Irving set in 1790. Nothing contradicts that in the movie, so that's where we're gonna put it. Similarly, we can put the Legend of Johnny Appleseed from Melody Time in the early 1800s. That movie's hero was based on a real person from around that same time. Jumping back to Europe, and something much more made up, we have Tangled and all of its various spin-off series and shorts. This whole little mini-franchise was kicked off by a bit of that star magic giving healing powers to a flower.
A single drop of sunlight fell from the heavens, and from this small drop of sun grew a magic, golden flower.
Regardless, this is set in the fictional France-adjacent kingdom of Corona in the late 1830s or early 1840s. How do we know that? Well, the animators researched fashion from that time frame while making the film. Plus, we know that Rapunzel and Eugene attend Elsa's coronation at the end of Frozen, and we know when that film takes place. Speaking of which, we know that Frozen and all of its nature ice magic is set in the small Scandinavian kingdom of Arendelle, in what is now modern-day Norway, exactly in the year 1843. That date we have thanks to a map dated 1840 that Anna and Elsa's parents had on their ship when it sank. And given that there's a 3-year time gap between that tragedy and the events of Frozen, it's just basic math. Similarly, Frozen 2 is set 3 years after the first film, landing it in 1846. Jumping forward a couple of decades, we have Alice in Wonderland, which sees Alice exploring one of these strange prison worlds originally created by the Disney gods at the start of the whole timeline. A lot of weird stuff has been allowed to evolve here on its own, thus the Cheshire Cat, Card Kingdom, etc., etc. Like Sleepy Hollow, Alice in Wonderland is based on a real book by Lewis Carroll, which took place in the 1860s. Unfortunately, not every movie is going to have a dated map or be based on a real book. For example, there's the Pecco Spill segment from Melody Time, based on the American cowboy folk hero. To date this one, beyond just Old West times, we had to take a look at the clothes. Specifically, how one character is shown wearing a bustle. This was a part of a dress meant to push up the rear of the skirt and became a prominent part of American and British fashion in the 1870s. That lines up with the real-world legend of Pecos Bill, so that's where we're going to be planting this one. Similarly, bustles also show up in Cinderella, which places that movie in the 1870s, and the landscape of the kingdom shown in the film resembles the real-world region of Occitania in southern France, which tracks for the location. Also worth noting that this movie has yet another appearance of a wish-granting magical being like the genie and the fairy godmother, and small sentient talking critters like the mice, further showing the impact star magic has had on the Disneyverse and just how different it is from our world. But another important thing that Cinderella does for us, it lets us place exactly where the Little Mermaid goes on our timeline. Here, let me explain. We know that the movie takes place on Prince Eric's island kingdom set in the Mediterranean, likely near the real-world island of Corsica. This would explain the various characters and visual influences from nearby European cultures like Britain, Italy, and France.
Nice young ladies, just don't swim around rescuing people in the middle of the ocean.
Oh, you're gonna love it. Chef's been fixing his specialty, stuffed crab.
Les poissons, how I love les poissons!
But the thing that really cements this time and place and why it's connected to Cinderella? Well, the king and the Grand Duke from Cinderella are shown attending Eric's wedding to Ursula, which was put together in less than a day. So Eric's kingdom would have to be close enough to southern France for them to make it to the ceremony on time. Corsica was even connected to France by telegraph by the year 1870, allowing for quick messages to make it to the characters of Cinderella. Plus, in Cinderella 2, Dreams Come True, the king and the Grand Duke rush off explaining,
We have important matters of state to attend to.
Important matters of state. Perhaps like a royal wedding? They even pack up a ton of just random valuables, likely wedding gifts they had to get on a quick turnaround. And they return just 2 days later. All of it just fits. And just to dot our I's and cross our T's, the direct-to-video sequel, The Little Mermaid 2: Return to the Sea, references the opera singer Enrico Caruso.
When I was a teenager, I had this high, squeaky voice. And then one day, I sound like Caruso.
Caruso's career began in the 1890s, so the first film being set in the 1870s would allow for Eric and Ariel to marry, enjoy life a bit, and then have a preteen daughter by the 1890s. Now, that took a bit of maneuvering to figure out, but something that's much easier for us, Home on the Range, which was set in the American Old West in 1889. The movie straight up lays this out for us thanks to a date listed on a deed. I love it when they make it just stupid easy for us, even if it's a stupid cow movie. Another easy one for us that is remarkably less stupid and cow-adjacent is The Jungle Book, set in India during the 1890s. We know this since that's the year that Rudyard Kipling's original book was published, and it's backed up by a line in the movie. It's the decade following Colonel Hatti's service as a war elephant, which he references in this line.
Back in '88, it was, what was it?
It's here where we come to another pivotal moment in the Disneyverse just from the sheer amount of important elements that all happened in one place. Pinocchio, which takes place in Italy. We can also pin this one down to the 1890s thanks to the Ferris wheel we see in the amusement park, and thankfully, this lines up with a lot of other evidence we see from the Disney canon. For instance, we can see one of Geppetto's earlier puppets in Corona during the events of Tangled about 50 years before, which checks out with just how old Geppetto would be at this point. But an even more significant connection might be to a movie you're not expecting, The Emperor's New Groove. Think about it. The Pleasure Island operation we see in Pinocchio is built on potions that transform boys into donkeys. Sound familiar? Pinocchio even takes place when Peru and Italy expanded their trade relationship in the real world. And we know that a number of the donkeys get shipped to salt mines. As it turns out, Peru is home to one of the longest running salt mines on the planet, which uses donkeys to this very day. So, you heard it here. The potion that transforms the kids in Pinocchio is the same one from The Emperor's New Groove. Whew.
Okay, it works. I suppose they managed to mass produce it.
That one took a lot to find the date, but thankfully our next entry makes things super easy. Rounding out the 1800s, we have The Great Mouse Detective, set in London during 1897, which we know thanks to a date on a handy newspaper. This movie is also the closest we're ever going to get to a Disney animated Sherlock Holmes, which makes me sad. I'd love to see that personally. But there's no need to dwell on that, just like there's no need to dwell on Make Mine Music, a collection of animated shorts, most of which are set in America. This bad boy's not even on Disney+, but it's part of the Disney canon, so we gotta count it. Most of the shorts are dotted across the first half of the 1900s, and they don't really leave much of an impact, so yeah, moving on. Just like The Great Mouse Detective, the next movie in the timeline also prominently features the Big Ben Clock Tower. I'm of course talking about Peter Pan, set in 1904 as confirmed in the film's pre-release promotional material.
Here, the city of London, back in 1904.
This film also once again goes hard on the magic of wishes and belief in fairies. There's a
Peter Pan, the boy that never grew up.
Reason it's a Disney classic. A movie that didn't leave much of an impact though, The Wind in the Willows from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This story was about some talking toads that takes place basically at the same time as Peter Pan in the English countryside, just a year later in 1905, which we know thanks to a dated invoice. And just like The Great Mouse Detective, it's another case of a sentient human-animal creature. Just thought I'd point that out, it will become relevant later. Heading across the pond, we actually have to make a pit stop in San Francisco. Here a scientist named Lenore Shimamoto was experimenting with some sort of new power source. But her invention inadvertently amplified the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake enough that it became known as just the Great Catastrophe. Thankfully, the city was rebuilt with the help of Japanese immigrants, whose influence on the city had it redubbed as San Fransokyo. But here's the thing, the power source that Shimamoto was creating, it was a star.
It created a star. A star?
Yeah, she was trying to harness the same star magic that set the Disneyverse on this wildly different path. The same stuff I assume the Atlanteans got their hands on and blew up like the whole world. Just goes to show how powerful this stuff is and how it continued to alter the Disneyverse even this far along the timeline. Heading over to New Orleans, we have Lady and the Tramp, which mostly takes place in 1908 based on a calendar marking a baby's delivery date. April of 1908 was the only month around this time that had April 1st fall on a Wednesday. And before we take a break from our animal-centric movies, we have to head from the French Quarter to France itself, where we have The Aristocats, set in Paris in the year 1910. Again, you just have to love it when they make it easy with these superimposed texts. We love it, it's great. Something that was not as easy though? Well, we're gonna put Tarzan in Africa also in the year 1910. Why would this one be hard? Well, first off, there's a popular theory floating around online that Tarzan's parents are actually King Agnar and Queen Iduna from Frozen. One of Frozen's co-directors actually has this headcanon themselves. But that doesn't really line up with the other things we know about these movies. For instance, it's said that the parents in Frozen were sailing to attend a wedding, the wedding of Rapunzel and Eugene from Tangled, which we've established takes place in Western or Central Europe. If the Frozen parents were coming from Norway to go to that wedding, why would they be close enough to Central Africa to wash up and build a house there? And secondly, honestly, I just don't see the resemblance here. We physically see all four of the parents in these films, and I just don't think that they look enough alike to make up for the difference in geography. And also, as we're about to see, the timeline it doesn't match up. So, okay, that gets us away from Frozen, but what else is the problem? Well, Jane and her father mentioned that Tarzan should meet a number of famous people back in England.
Darwin and Kipling, Queen Victoria!
But the problem here is that there was no point where all of these people would have been both alive and famous at the same time. Darwin died in 1882, years before Kipling published the works that would earn him his fame. What's more, there's also projector slides featuring the Eiffel Tower, which wasn't completed until 1889, and an airplane which wasn't invented until 1903. Basically, this whole movie's a bit of a timey-wimey mess, so to land on our date here, we're going to go with the latest possible time that it could take place. And we get that thanks to The Legend of Tarzan, the animated series spin-off of the film. In one episode, Tarzan meets US President Teddy Roosevelt during his famous year-long African expedition that concluded in 1910. So, in the same way that there were small changes thanks to the star magic in the Disneyverse, we're gonna say that a lot of the lifespans of a few historical figures got extended. Queen Victoria gets to see her 90th birthday, and Charles Darwin lasts the ripe old age of 100.
You've read Darwin, it's called natural selection.
Ah, perfect segue, because that brings us to the main events of Atlantis: The Lost Empire, set in 1914 per the superimposed text at the start of the film. Easy, we love it. This movie really shows us how the development of technology has also been enhanced by the influence of star magic. Though submarines existed in the real world as early as the 1620s, the subs in World War I were nowhere near what we see in Atlantis. And trust me, things get much crazier later on because of this. But for now, we have to head back to New Orleans for the events of The Princess and the Frog. This is set in 1926, which we know thanks to a newspaper, and shows us yet another case of magic turning people like Tiana and Naveen into animals. And in a slightly different case of talking animals, we then have both Winnie the Pooh and the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Just like the books they're based on, these films take place in the 1920s, though Christopher Robin's imagination is the magic that brought Pooh and his friends to life in this case. Then The Fox and the Hound is set in the rural United States, probably in the 1930s, based on the technology we see in the sequel, because, of course, there's a Fox and the Hound 2. Is nothing sacred? I guess not, because then there's Peter Pan Return to Neverland, set in London during 1941. We know this because it takes place during the Blitz, the World War II bombing campaign against the United Kingdom. And around the same time, there's Dumbo and Bambi, both set in the United States around the time of their release, 1941 and 1942 respectively. Up next, there's a bit of an interesting case. At the same time, we have the films Saludos Amigos, The Three Caballeros, and Fun and Fancy Free, all of which take place in roughly the mid-1940s. Just like The Black Cauldron, I figured that these would be very difficult to place because they so heavily feature societies full of humanoid animals similar to The Sorcerer's Apprentice. But other films don't have those characters or peoples as widespread, if at all. Well, the solution was quite obvious. Fun and Fancy Free introduces the idea that these films with these characters are literally stories being told or heard in-universe by Jiminy Cricket. That's what's happening here. It's just like The Matrix, we're 2 layers deep with these films and their segments being stories inside of the Disneyverse, likely influenced by stories or historical records of stuff like The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Now, I know that we've been glossing over most of the sequels unless they were main movies like Frozen 2, or they were needed to help place a film in our timeline here, but we have to talk about Atlantis again. Yeah, the direct-to-video sequel Atlantis, Milo's Return, takes place in the 1940s after World War II, over 30 years after the main events of the first film. The movie also ends with Atlantis returning to the surface, which will have a big impact on technology in the future. Trust me, we'll get there. Oh, and also, just before we move on, Atlantis 2 also lets us slot in the classic Disney animated series Gargoyles into the timeline. See, Milo's Return was originally going to be a spin-off series called Team Atlantis, which was canceled after The Lost Empire bombed at the box office. Well, one of the episodes of Team Atlantis was going to feature Demona, a main antagonist from Gargoyles. And this wasn't just like a random idea they had a script done. This basically opens up all of the mythology touched by Gargoyles and fits it into the Disneyverse, including their versions of Odin, Puck, King Arthur, and Avalon. Guess the kid from Sword in the Stone had a major glow-up, didn't he? Honestly, this one is just a bit of selfish Lee content because Gargoyles was such a formative part of my childhood. This might not fit 100% with everything else here, but just let me have this one, okay? Something that is clear and does fit in, though, Encanto, with all of its star magic packed inside of the casita, is up next, set in 1950s Colombia. This is 50 years after the Madrigal family fled their home due to some sort of Colombian conflict, likely the Thousand Days War, which happened around the year 1900. Bruno also references telenovelas, which didn't really become a thing until the 50s, so it fits.
So what do you like? What do you like? You like sports? Game show? Telenovelas.
And a thing that was also around in the 50s? Dalmatians. Over 100 of them, in fact. Yeah, right after Encanto, we have 101 Dalmatians set in London, though the date's a bit funky. Why? Well, we see a calendar that suggests 1954, but a newspaper that states 1958. It's possible that someone could have had a calendar that long that was just out of date, but just to be on the safe side, we're actually going to place this movie and its sequel in late 1960 and early 1961. This is because its sequel, 101 Dalmatians 2, Patch's London Adventure, has multiple newspapers from 1961. Also, real quick, it's just truly tragic they didn't name this sequel 102 Dalmatians. Like, that title is one of the few things a live-action remake did better than the animation. Continuing our trend of classic animal movies, next up we have The Rescuers, set during the time of its release in 1977, with the bulk of the story taking place in a Louisiana bayou. Man, Louisiana in the Disneyverse gets real busy, doesn't it? Anyway, we also know that the sequel, The Rescuers Down Under, takes place in Australia during 1979, all thanks to this shot of a calendar. It also lines up with the fact that Bernard and Bianca get engaged in this movie, and marriage proposals typically happen after about 2.5 years of dating. The timeline just matches perfectly, even if we are talking about a movie with talking mice and a grand mouse society. But counter to that, we also have some
you do know that the longevity of a mouse is not that long, right? Sorry.
normal animals living in human society, like those we see in Oliver and Company. This film is set in New York City in 1988, the year it was released, which we can confirm thanks to another calendar. Also, before you mention it, yes, this movie does have a lot of familiar-looking dogs from other Disney films, but we know that they're not the same animals and that they can't live that long, so we're just gonna chalk this up to animals of the same breed and same species just looking similar. I mean, it's like not—
Yeah, it's like same but different. Sorry. Longevity is a very real thing. Sorry.
Every deer can be Bambi's mom, even if the animation is copied wholesale. And from here, we're actually done with the 20th century. Well, unless you want to count Gargoyles, the lion's share of which takes place in the 90s, but again, that's some selfish Lee content. But regardless, now, moving into the 21st century, we have a movie that's going to introduce a lot of big ideas for the Disneyverse. See, Earth was not the only planet in the Disneyverse to have life develop on it, or technology supercharged by star magic. No, there's actually tons of these, enough to form a government in the Milky Way galaxy known as the United Galactic Federation. This is a powerful faction who keep an eye over thousands of planets and have laws against certain science that would go against the natural order of things, the natural way of star magic. They believe this so much that by the year 2001, they arrest Dr. Jumba Jookuba for creating a new species and seek to destroy his work.
It is an affront to nature. It must be destroyed.
How do we know all this? Well, it's all thanks to Lilo and Stitch. Yeah, we see the Galactic Federation in action in this movie, and we know that it takes place in the year 2001 thanks to the date that we see on Stitch's adoption paper after he escapes to Earth and starts his life on Hawaii. Also worth noting that Earth's history with weird sentient animal creatures is kind of on display in this movie. Like, very few people call out how weird the aliens look when they're visiting Earth and they've put on some very bad disguises. People are just being polite. After all, this is a planet that's had everything from dragons to talking mice to giant talking mice. Anyway, the existence of this Galactic Federation has some pretty wild implications later on, but for now, well, even with the boost from Atlantis, the technology on Earth has a bit more to go before it can catch up with this Galactic Federation, but that doesn't mean it isn't impressive. Why do I say that? Well, because of Meet the Robinsons. Yeah, I forgot about this one too, but this movie starts in the year 2007 before we have a 30-year time jump giving us a glimpse into the future. This is spelled out pretty clearly in the film's marketing. Anyway, this film involves a lot of time travel, which allows its main character Lewis to see where technology is headed and really help further accelerate scientific development when he goes back to 2007. Man, time travel always complicates things, doesn't it? Something less complicated though?
Hey, time travel! I see that as absolute win.
Is Bolt, set around its release date in 2008. Nothing super eventful there. But more eventfully, around this time, we also have Wreck-It Ralph and Ralph Breaks the Internet, set at roughly the same times as their release dates, 2012 and 2018 respectively. The sequel even acknowledges the 6-year time difference.
Look, I get it. You've been married 6 years. You're looking to spice things up.
This shows us that technology has advanced more quickly than in our world, enough so that characters in video games and online are sentient. Though I will say these movies are a bit weird in the context of the Disneyverse. After all, Ralph Breaks the Internet confirms that the Walt Disney Company straight up exists in the Disneyverse, along with the Disney Princesses, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and the Muppets. And while that is a weird quirk, it's not exactly impossible. Like, Disney could exist in the Disneyverse, creating films and merch and attractions based off of real-world history. So instead of making movies about fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and the rest, they're just making movies based on the true stories of Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and the rest. They even go as far as to like straight up joke about this in some of their movies.
I like to see the movie they make about you now.
I just hope they stay true to what really happened.
They might even make a motion picture about you.
And like, honestly, this isn't even unprecedented in Disney's sphere. A fictional version of Marvel Comics literally exists in the main Marvel continuity, publishing comics based on the adventures of the characters that exist in that universe. It's fun.
Pikachu!
And it's weird and it's meta, but it's not universe breaking. Speaking of superheroes though, we now have to fast forward to the main events of Big Hero 6, set all the way in 2032. We know this because there are posters in the film pointing out that it's the 95th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge's opening. The bridge finished construction in 1937, so 95 years later would be 2032. This movie is our first real look at just how far advanced the technology in the Disneyverse has gotten thanks to the advancements of Atlantis and the star magic. Like, this movie gives us AI, fully functional robots, and tech advanced enough for there to be legitimate superheroes in the world all by the 2030s. Then, just to wrap up this part, we gotta return to 2037 and the future we saw in Meet the Robinsons. There's a lot of similar, yet just slightly more advanced tech here as compared to Big Hero 6, but the biggest thing that stuck out to me? It seems like technology has gotten good enough to infuse regular animals with star magic that lets them speak, as we see with the genetically engineered frogs in this film.
Hey, Frankie, baby! You gotta tell us what
funny a joke.
Man, this movie sure was, it was something. Okay, so now here is where things get huge, wild, and crazy. Yeah, we're gonna see a massive time jump between Meet the Robinsons in 2037 and the next films in the Disneyverse timeline. And in that time frame, there are some big changes to the world.
Because, if I'm not wrong, humans kind of disappeared.
Whole galaxy. See, at some point, humanity must achieve interstellar travel and join the rest of the aliens up there in the stars. In fact, eventually, humanity leaves Earth altogether, and we know this thanks to what I'm gonna call the animal people movies. You know the ones. They have very humanoid-looking animals walking upright like they're people. At first, I wondered if they were like on their own planet, but we know that these humanoid animal movies have to take place on Earth.
Look on all the other planets, you can only find them right here on Earth.
So, how is that possibly going to fit? Well, if humanity leaves Earth and expands out into space with the Galactic Federation, that would give the sentient animals a chance to rise up and be the new people of Earth. And we actually know that this is something that some of the talking animals on Earth have wanted for a while. In the Jungle Book, King Louie explains,
I want to be like you.
When I'm human, as I hope to be.
and in Wish, the goat goes even further.
I dream of a utopian metropolis where all mammals are equal and wear clothes.
So, now that humanity has gone on to greener pastures in the stars, the talking animals take the chance to make Earth their own, where they can evolve into their own societies and eventually become more humanoid. Early on, they look a bit like...
case and points, using animal reference in Chinese, there's a saying called 老虎不在家, 猴子称大王. Something like that. 老虎不在山, 猴子称大王, something like that. In which the humans are the king. With the absence of humans, the monkeys take the reins, take the throne. Literal monkeys, I guess.
Civilizations from Earth's past, and even reuse old names for their peoples and their governments. This is where we find Robin Hood in our timeline. During this period, a lot of predators from the top of the food chain are in charge, like the lions King Richard and Prince John. I mean, heck, even Robin Hood and Maid Marian are foxes. This ingrains a lot of prejudice into this society, even hundreds of years later. Like in Chicken Little, where a fox bullies Chicken Little and his friends, and in Zootopia, where a lion is elected mayor, though predators are often stereotyped as violent. Thankfully, by the end of that movie, they do seem to be working towards a more equal society, which is great. You love to see it. And just the cherry on top of this, we know that this strange version of Earth full of talking animals is a bit of a tourist destination for aliens in the Galactic Federation.
We stop here every summer on the way to the in-laws.
Every year.
Yeah, we see in Chicken Little that some animals come by this planet every year, like it's an apple orchard or amusement park. But perhaps they should have been focusing their attention elsewhere, because at some point, this entire Galactic Federation must collapse or change drastically. Perhaps this was due to some sort of galactic-wide catastrophe, maybe some sort of civil war. We just don't have enough information to say. But what we can say for sure, space pirates took advantage of this chaos with the likes of Captain Nathaniel Flint gathering a vast hoard of treasure and hiding it on planets throughout the galaxy, while the remnants of the Federation likely reformed into some sort of monarchy with a navy and interstellar academy to train new recruits. But why do I say all of this? Well, because the Galactic Federation we see in Lilo and Stitch is nothing like the galaxy we see in the last film in our timeline, Treasure Planet. Yeah, the super stylized technology and universe of this movie with all of its classic nautical ships and imagery is a far cry from the sleek sci-fi designs of Lilo and Stitch. Oh, and we know that bit about the monarchy rising up thanks to ships like the RLS Legacy. According to the spin-off game Treasure Planet Battle at Procyon, the ship prefix RLS stands for Royal Light Ship. Royal as in royalty, a king or queen. And yes, we know that all of this has to be part of the same timeline as the Federation we see in Lilo and Stitch, because the young Jim Hawkins has a plush doll of Stitch in his room, meaning that
Hey, that's cute.
Adventures of Experiment 626 must be well known enough in this world to become merchandisable. You know, real talk aside here, but Treasure Planet has always been in my top 3 favorite Disney animations. I wish it was more successful and we got more of it, but alas. And from here, well...
Or maybe a live action remake. Maybe.
There's nothing else. That's the entire Disney theory so far. The entire story of the Disneyverse by piecing together all of their movies and as best a way we could. Is some of it a bit janky? Yeah, there are a lot of films here with a lot of similar but slightly different ideas. But I think we did a really good job here. Our team, our editors and researchers really crushed it on this just massive project. And honestly, this was just so much fun, and I can't wait to see where the future movies fit into the Disney theory. But until Disney releases a new movie, remember that it's all just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching this entire thing. It's nearly 1 hour long. Gosh. Thank you so much for watching this video together with me from the Film Theorist. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Thank you. Subscribe. Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye. Subscribe.